Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our product launch event today. Um, Excited to have see so many of you join. Let's just give it a minute more for more folks to trickle in, and we'll get started here. All right, we're 2 minutes over, so let's go ahead and get started. Um, Excited to be co-presenting this with Brian, who heads up our AI and data science initiatives, as well as Rohan, who's of course the CEO and co-founder of the company. I'm Anant. I head up the product team here. We have a packed agenda. There are four independent sessions that we'd be going through. We'll be kicking it off with Brian, who's going to cover our latest and greatest enhancements on AI-powered detection and our classification capabilities. I'll be covering a deep dive on our comprehensive exfiltration prevention capabilities, and then Brian will also go through our user forensics and app intelligence. And at the very end, we'll have Rohan cover our MCP and AI agent capabilities that we'd be announcing very soon. This is a packed agenda. We have continuous sessions. The first three sessions are about 45 minutes each, and the last one should take us about 30 minutes. We expect this to run. We have a slot for 2 hours, 45 minutes. Totally understand some of you may have conflicts, you may need to drop. That's totally okay. We will be circulating a recording of this session to you. There'll be detailed documentation and some material that we'll share async. So if you need to drop, that's totally fine. We'd love to keep it conversational. So you can't speak up, but feel free to submit questions in the chat, and very happy to address as we go further along. So with that, let's kick it off, and excited to have a useful set of sessions here. Brian, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, let me go ahead and share my screen. So I'm going to talk today about our AI-powered detection classification and some really exciting new things that we're adding to it. If you're joining us today, it's probably because, or likely because you've experienced the quality of our sensitive data detection or have heard about it. So we currently have over 150 AI-based entity detectors, across a wide spread of different data types, and supporting structured files, unstructured files, images, etc. And our system is really built for real-world data. So when you do kind of contrived tests, other systems might work well, but when you're scanning billions and billions of assets, logs and Excel files and emails, you're really going to find some challenges in those formats. And to address those challenges, we've spent the last 3+ years working on a multimodal AI approach with some deterministic validation. So we employ, depending on the data that we're looking at, we'll deploy a convolutional neural network or computer vision or billion token transformers or LLMs. And then once we scan through all those, we'll also do some kind of validation so that we're not hallucinating. And what that's gotten us to is somewhere between 90 and 95% precision out of the box. And then when we work with customers, because every data set can be different. Every business is solving a different problem. We may have to do some retraining of models, but very quickly we can get up to 95% precision, which means a completely different experience than you've experienced with traditional DLP. And people are kind of shocked or surprised. Yes, 19 out of those 20 detections are going to be accurate. And they may be coming from a world where maybe 19 of the 20 are false positives. So it's a really transformative experience. And when you get to that level of accuracy, I mean, that's human level accuracy, you can really trust automation. So either enable remediation through your end users or some policy automation and do that with confidence. So all of this is kind of foundational to the company and why people know about Nightfall. But what we found, the more and more you understand a problem, the more you find sort of the loose ends. And what we found is, yeah, this entity detection really has limits. And customers or prospects come to us and they say, yeah, but I want to protect customer IDs or member IDs or patient IDs. And these all have unique patterns. And up until recently, we said, hey, we can help you with building a regex detector. Just because your model, your ID would be different than, say like a membership ID or a medical record number at another company. We want to enable that flexibility. But what we have found is even with regex and regex context rules, there still can be some problems because the regex doesn't understand the context in which those entities are used. Additionally, and even a harder problem to solve is when people come to us and they say, hey, how do I protect our IP or confidential documents like source code or contracts or customer lists? And as I mentioned, and the traditional answer for this is, yeah, you can share hundreds of samples with us and we'll build you something. But you can imagine the samples can take time to create. There may be multiple different types of samples in that. And so it's hard for the model. The model might get confused because there's too many patterns. And so getting to a place where it's accurate can be difficult. Not everybody's a data science and has that mindset when they're generating these samples. And you might have data drift that would break the model over time. So both of these mean, again, that you're going to have very high false positive rates, and it can be a lot of effort with no guaranteed results. So although this entity detection remains foundational for us, our customers have asked us to go further. And so what we've introduced in the last month or so are three new ways to detect sensitive data. So building on the foundation, we now have enabled prompt-based entity detectors. So these can use both the patterns that you'll describe in the prompt and then the context that you described in the prompt to accurately detect the entities that are important for you. File classifiers. So there's a lot of types of documents that you can think of, like I mentioned, proprietary source code or financial projections, HR files, things like that, where we can pre-build classifiers that can accurately detect these. And so out of the box, we now support 23 different file classes. And if you need something that's outside of those classes or you need more specificity, like, yeah, this is a financial document, but for mortgage applications, I really want to say, yep, there's, a folder full of mortgage applications here, or somebody has downloaded, this zip file full of mortgage files or has uploaded it to their personal sync. It's really critical for them to identify those maybe as opposed to, say, like a grant document or a business loan. And so we think that now going from entities and then adding in these prompt-based file classifiers, which you can build yourself and understand the context in which things are used, that we really have the first on the market comprehensive approach to sensitive data protection. And I'm going to jump through some examples. So the first one I'm going to show you is the prompt-based entity detector. And as I mentioned, these are for like internal IDs, maybe coupon codes, identifiers that are sensitive to your business. It's really kind of amazing how many times we've got questions for this and how many times I've helped people build regex for these. Um, but now there's no need for regex, just a really complete description of what you're looking for. And it will include that pattern-based matching and it will be validated by the customer context. So let's jump in and do a demo. In this scenario, I'm going to build a custom medical record number detector. And the details here, health insurance companies, hospitals, you can imagine, are tracking medical record numbers of patients. And in this case, this entity, this business's pattern for this entity, it always begins with an MRN, then there's a dash and a year, and then four numbers. And the YYY is the year of the registration. And since we moved to this, they moved to this new system in 2020. This year can't be older, can't be 2019 or earlier. So here's an example where we might want to detect this. So the patient, John Smith, is calling to discuss some lab results. But we know from our data that we can our transaction ID can randomly generate a pattern that looks like this. So it is really three alpha characters, then four numerical characters, and then four numerical characters. So, there can be situations here where we match this exactly, and we don't want this example to come up. So I'm going to jump into Nightfall and build one of these for you. So we start with, you're looking at the Nightfall application, maybe a little bit of a new version of it, which isn't quite out yet. But if I go into detection and I go in here and look for medical, I've pre-built some of these. Whoops. Let me go into detectors. So first thing we need to do is build this detector. So let's go into custom. I'm going to scroll down and here, medical record number. This is one that I've built already. The way that you get to the screen is you would go custom detector and scroll down to entity detector prompt based. And you would get this dialog box. Since I don't want you to suffer through me typing, I'm just going to edit something that's existing and walk you through it. So let me zoom in here. So first we give it a name, we give it a description. This is just for your record keeping, really, and it'll appear when we find an alert. Here's the critical point, the prompt. So this is the same prompt that I showed you in the slide deck. So the medical record number is used to track patient records. This gives the model the context it needs to recognize a medical record number from the transaction ID. Here's where I'm describing the pattern. I can do it, in natural language. Here's where I'm describing some of the validation that we might want to do. And then I'm giving it some keywords to look for. And in this case, I'm going to add the word patient. So we have some keywords. Then the model does better when it has some examples to key off of and some positive examples and some negative examples. So I've pasted in here the transaction ID. So now we have enough information to build the prompt. But before we do that, and down here, we've given you some help so you can be coached through this process. But before we actually save it, we want to test the prompt. So what we're doing here is we're asking the model, hey, I've provided you all this information. Do you have enough confidence that you could score a document and find this entity with 75% confidence or higher? And here it's past the hygiene check. If I were to remove some of this information, like say, remove this, it probably won't pass the hygiene check. No, in fact, this time it did. Let me put that back in there and retest it, just so you can see how the model's thinking. So, yep, it knows the context. It's found some keywords in your prompt, and it's actually created the regex for you and uh, stored an example match and a negative example. So I'm going to close this. So now if I add this to a policy, which I've already done, and a policy that's monitoring Slack. And I'm going to drag and drop in a file that has the same data. I'm off screen and I'm going to find this file. Stand by on one. Where did it go? Prompt-based detectors. Let me search for it.
In the meanwhile, if any of you have questions, feel free to post that in the chat, and we're happy to take those live.
There we go. So I'm going to drag and drop in a file and share it with a friend in Slack. So here you can see the first sentence contains the MRN, second sentence contains a transaction ID. And in a few minutes or somewhere between, say, like 10 seconds and 2 minutes, we should see this file get redacted or, excuse me, get quarantined. I'm going to get ready for you to see this coming through. Let's jump back into Slack. So sometimes we're dependent on Slack.
Yeah, while that is coming up, Brian,
Yeah.
Chris has a question. Is there a possible future where we can redact, delete files or data sent into another Slack connect? I'm happy to take that. So today, via the Slack API, the Discovery API, we get visibility of those messages that are shared in connect channels. However, from a remediation standpoint, as long as the user is from your organization, we have control and we can take those actions in those connect channels. But if there are any external users who are posting that, then we cannot remediate that content.
Okay. While we're waiting for this to jump through, um, prior to our demo here, I did a test. And in this case, you can see in the first sentence, it found the medical record number and found and highlighted it. In the second sentence, you can just see the beginning of the snippet because it didn't recognize this as a medical record number. So that detection should just come through in a few seconds here. So that was a prompt-based entity detection example. So let's go ahead and now try the file classifier. So the challenge here with file classifiers, if you remember, was we want to protect documents that don't necessarily have sensitive entities, but they're really, really important to the business. On the left here, you can see some of the list of file classifiers that we support, from background checks to internal source code. Again, we have 23 and growing. So anytime a customer asks us for a new standard file classifier that we feel is broadly applicable, we'll build a new one. Otherwise, we coach people through how to build a custom one, which is our next demo. So first, let's show you how file classifiers work. And here I'm going to switch and go back into hyperbolic mortgage, our demo tenant, and going to go into detection, and I'm going to show you the list of file classifiers that we support. So again, background checks, confidential files, customer lists, HR files, patient data, payroll, tax files, etc. The example for our demo today that I'm going to show you is I'm going to demo internal source code and HR files and customer lists. So let's zoom back out and go into detection. Let's go into detection response. Cool. So we're in detection response. I'm going to go into Slack. And I earlier today dropped these 4 files into Slack. So we have a performance review, that's our HR file. We have source code. Here, I'll jump through them here. We have internal source code. So this is our secret Atlas decision engine that we want to protect. We have some public source code. So this is very common library used, the Lodash OpenJS library. We have an employee file or an HR file that's an employee review, and we have a customer list. So we want to see if we can protect these using the file classifier. So I drag and dropped these a few minutes ago, and you can see them here. And if I go into Nightfall, you can see uh, here is the customer list. So the customer list.xl file. And with file classifiers, we won't show you sensitive entities. We're going to give you a description of why we think this matches that format. So in this case, if I zoom in, the document contains customer IDs, sales numbers, addresses, contact names. So yeah, it looks like it's a customer list. The HR file. So if you remember, it was a performance review. So it has sections like performance ratings, strengths, areas of development. Yeah, definitely looks like a true positive here. Source code public. Okay, interesting. This document's clearly source code. It can tell because of the copyright notice. And this is a really popular library that it recognizes. And then lastly, the internal source code. Because of the presence of that hyperbolic mortgage, it can tell that it's internal. And then the code is code that it doesn't recognize. So this model's been trained on a lot of public code, and it hasn't seen this code before, so it makes that decision. So that is file classifiers. Anybody have questions on that?
Uh, yeah, I see one new question from Wesley. Hey, Wesley. So Wesley has a question. Will there ever be a feature instead of redacting sensitive content in Slack, have that content stored in a secure portal for view? This is similar to encrypted email. Yeah, Wesley, of course, you're adopting our email encryption capabilities today. So yes, we are evaluating a file encryption action across all the other apps, and we'll keep you posted. I think that's a pretty valid, legitimate ask there.
Okay, great. So let's go back and do our third demo. Uh, So this was the prompt-based file classifiers. So if it's either outside of those 23 file classifiers that we've created for you, or you need more specificity, it's a custom business report that's sensitive or a custom business form that's sensitive, then you can use the prompt-based file classifiers to create one yourself. So let's go back into Nightfall and show you that in action. So in this case, our fictitious company is Hyperbolic Mortgage, and we have a sample mortgage application. So it's got, confidential borrower information like where they're employed, what their salary is, if there is a co-borrower, their assets, standard stuff for a mortgage application. And this is something that we want to protect specifically. We want to have a specific remediative action applied um, to uh, to any either data movement or data sharing of this kind of file. So let's go back into Nightfall and show you how this works. I go into configuration, detection, detectors. To build the custom detector, I pick file classifier prompt based. In this case, I've already built one. And I'm going to jump down there by just going to the custom detectors at the bottom. Here it is, custom mortgage application. This one's a little bit different. So if I zoom in, again, we have the name, description, that's for reporting purposes, and the prompt. So we describe the prompt. You can see in here that I'm just talking about the kinds of uh, information that this document might contain, but I don't specify any patterns. So it collects borrower's information, and it's used in this context, mortgage origination process. I do include some keywords, so mortgage application, assets and liabilities, et cetera. And then I upload a file that's a sample. So if we're just to be more and more sure that what we're testing for can be found. So if I go back and look at my sample data sets and upload the file that I just showed you and test the prompt. So again, it shares its interpretation of the prompt that you gave. It repeats all the keywords and it logs the sample file so that later, if you need to edit it or update it, you can see what the original sample file that was provided was. So now I have this detector. I can add it to a policy. And before our meeting here, here you can see the medical record number that I did earlier. That file has been redacted. So earlier, I uploaded something called a business loan application. Remember, we're looking for a home mortgage application. I uploaded a grant application and I uploaded that sample mortgage or a different version of the mortgage application. And my policy was to quarantine the mortgage application. So you can see it detected it, quarantined it, and ignored these two others. And if I go back into Nightfall, and let's say that this was, again, a sensitive data policy, it could be an exfiltration or a posture policy as well. And if I look back through here, I should see the mortgage application, custom mortgage application. Yep. Um, so this matched our custom detector. Cool. So great. Nightfall has spent years and years making sure that these detections are accurate and for entities. And now we've answered these questions from customers around, hey, what about my custom patterns? I don't know Regex. I don't know Yara. What about intellectual property or confidential documents like source code? And what about other things where I need more specificity? So we've answered all three of those questions and have built upon, our foundational aspect of, having good detection is absolutely critical for a DLP system.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. There's a question in the chat for you. Kristen has a question. Do the file detectors or the new AI entity-based detectors function with input in languages other than English?
Yes. Yes, we've tested them in Southeast Asia. Say, for example, we had a customer that wanted to do background checks and medical checks, and they worked in Vietnamese, Malaysian, um, Chinese, Japanese, etc. So far, so good. With our testing, it says it's using a multi-language model, and it seems to be working great.